Hey kids, trying something different. I'm trying a Murdertizer that I'm recording on my own, and it's going miserably bad. This is probably the 27th time I've tried to do this. So I do want you to know what's going on. There is a lot going on behind the scenes. You just don't know it, and I appreciate you hanging in with me. We're getting a website together for the podcast, which is a good thing to do since I've had the domain name for 4 years and done nothing with it. I'm taking a criminal investigation class, which I'm really excited about. Started that yesterday, and it's fascinating. And I have finally some help. I have a wonderful editor who will be helping me get the podcast in some sort of a condition where you can listen and not be horrified. And I have a guest host who will be working with me this weekend on a full-length episode of A Missing Person in Missoula, Montana. So I'm going to give you the information on what's going on in the Will Cierzan case. He is the reason I started this podcast 4 years ago. He went missing in my area in Santa Clarita, specifically from his home in Saugus. And it has been a journey getting his nephew indicted for his disappearance and his murder. And while we didn't have a body, and that can really hamper an investigation, as most of you know, a lot of district attorneys are unwilling to file charges against someone if there isn't a body. But we all know Will did not walk away from his life and his wife, Linda, their home and his dog and his family. We know that Daniel did something terrible to him. And from what we know now, he did even worse things with the help of his father, Chuck, who is Will's younger brother. So if you're unfamiliar, we covered this case in the 4th episode, I believe episode 120, and again maybe in episode 164. And there have been many updates over the years, finally getting Daniel indicted. Many postponements of trials because of the pandemic and other things, obviously. But I feel like we're seeing a lot of movement now. So last week, the first week in February of 2022, there was another preliminary hearing, and there were victim impact statements read by his wife, Linda, and his sister, Andrea. Daniel defiantly shaking his head. But what was fascinating is that the judge did not approve the plea agreement. And I am grateful to Judge Zaki for what he did, because he said that in his 15 years on the bench, he had only turned down 5 plea agreements when the district attorney and the defense attorneys had worked so hard on hammering out a deal. But this would be the 6th time, and I'm grateful, because what was brought to the court as a punishment for Daniel is ridiculous. He's already spent 2 years in a detention center, and the sentence was 6 years. But the way it goes is for voluntary manslaughter, it would be cut in half at 3 years, and then he would have many years of probation. Well, he's already done 2 years. He would only do 1 more year and then be released, and that's absolutely not enough for what he did to Will Cierzan, his uncle. So I'm grateful that Judge Zaki is making everyone go back to the drawing board and figure something out. I'm a little stymied by the district attorney, Tanaz Mokiev, who I have great respect and faith in, why she would sign off on something like this. But, there's probably things going on behind the scenes that I am unaware of. But I'm grateful that they have to come back at the beginning of April and have something different, or that's when jury selection begins. And that's a beautiful thing. I don't think anyone wants to go through a jury trial, least of all Daniel and his representation. I don't want Linda and Andrea to have to go through hearing more of the details of what happened. And what happened is already terrible enough. What Daniel sort of admitted to is that on Thursday, January 26th of 2017, he killed his uncle, Will Cierzan, and that he put his body in a dumpster in Agua Dulce, which is a town just north of Santa Clarita. It's very rural, and most everyone has large properties, a lot of horse ranches, so there are a lot of dumpsters, and he found one, and I'm shocked that no one found Will, but I can tell you who wasn't shocked. That's Pam Coronado, the psychic detective who said that 5 years ago, when I asked her to take a look at Will's case, that we would never find his body, that he was in a dumpster. She described an outbuilding, that he was put in a dumpster, and that he was going to be in a landfill. And she, I think, for all intents and purposes, is correct. Unless something changes and Daniel changes his statement, which I no longer believe anything that comes out of his mouth. But unless something changes drastically, Pam is absolutely correct that that's what happened to Will. And that is heartbreaking. And yet there is some relief, some peace in knowing what we think happened. It explains why no trace of him was ever found. All of the people that searched for him in this area, all of the people that prayed that something, somehow, something of Will would be found. It makes sense. It makes sense in the timing. When he left their driveway, Will and Linda Cierzan's home, at 5:12 p.m. on Thursday, January 26th. And an hour and 15 minutes or so later, he's seen driving his distinctive SUV past the Bank of America and their video cameras. That would be about the amount of time it would take to drive Will a little further north to a more rural area and throw him away in a dumpster like he's a bag of garbage. And that is a horrifying thing. I know there are people who think that that did not happen, that are still looking for Will. I know there are people that think perhaps Daniel drove around with Will in his SUV and disposed of him later, and that could have happened. It just fits the timeline, which is, again, horrifying, and yet some things are answered. We know that there is Will's blood in the back of Daniel's SUV. We know there is some blood spatter behind the chair in his man cave. It looks as if he bludgeoned Will, and I don't know if anything else was used. I don't know if he's admitted to anything else other than beating his uncle to death. And maybe we'll never know. Maybe he'll tell us. Maybe we'll find out one day. But at least I feel like we're getting closer to this ending, and hopefully some more answers will have to come out and some more time will have to be done. Not that there's ever going to be justice in this case, because how can there be justice when nothing that Daniel says and no punishment that is meted out will ever bring Will back to his wife, to his family, to his friends. A good, kind man who worked at the gift shop at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Santa Clarita, who trained adult, challenged people to work, to have jobs, to be functioning members of society, who saw people as people, not their disability, who treated everyone the same. When someone takes someone like this, a beautiful, productive member of society, away from us, they put out a light. One of those lights that keeps the world moving. And Daniel Cierzan doesn't deserve to get to put this light out and really have such a small amount of punishment. Something more needs to be put in place so that people like him can't be out. He's not going to be a functioning member of society. I don't think that anything that has happened to him over the last 5 years is going to change and make him a better person. I would like to believe that, but I'm not sure that he deserves that sort of faith and that sort of trust. I feel like he needs to stay where he is for a very long time I don't know how one breaks down voluntary manslaughter from involuntary manslaughter, but I can tell you one thing, 6 years is not nearly long enough, and a shortened sentence is an insult to those who knew and loved Will Cierzan, a man whose life did not need to be ended the way it was, a man who loved his life, who would sit in his backyard and say to his wife, "This is as good as it gets." I mean, that's kind of amazing. That's kind of an amazing thing. And Linda, who loved spending her time with Will, he was her whole life. She needed to get to live more years of her life with her beloved. Having lost Mark quickly in the last few months, I understand to the best of my ability. Obviously, having someone you love pass from natural causes quickly is not in the same realm as having a family member take away your beloved by some ridiculous means and for absolutely no reason whatsoever. But the one thing I know is that as humans, we've all experienced grief. We've all gone through something. It doesn't mean that it's all the same, but I also don't want to quantify pain. We've all experienced something painful, a loss, grief. And I know that Linda is having a hard time understanding that Will's not coming back. She has held on to faith that he is somewhere out there and just didn't know who he was and that he would be returning home to her. And I think it's become much more clear that that's not going to happen. And that is the part that cleaves my heart in half. And I know that Linda will keep Will's memory with her. And because of that, Will isn't gone. The people of Santa Clarita who searched for him, the co-workers who adored him, the family members and friends who loved him, we're all going to hold out that light and we're going to remember Will Cierzan. There's nothing that Daniel Cierzan can do to put that light out, no matter how hard he tries. So I will be keeping you updated on the case. I will be back from a trip to Cincinnati by the time the next court date comes around at the beginning of April. If there is a continuation of this and they do start jury selection, I will be there. To the best of my ability, I promise to keep you informed on this case. I look very forward to the upcoming full-length episode on a missing persons case from Montana, and I'm looking forward to getting the help that I need to make this podcast what it was. We all know it's going to be different. It's going to be very different without Mark, but I'm going to do the best I can because you Tip-Sters deserve that. I can't thank you enough for all of your support. I have new patrons joining from different countries. It's spectacular. Dorota from Poland, Jody from Australia, Susan, who has upped the pledge of her Patreon account, even when I haven't been able to put out content. And I promise you it's not because I'm not trying. I'm trying. I'm just failing miserably. But I know I'm getting some good help. And if you have any cases you want me to take a look at, please consider sending them to jttipsters@gmail.com. You can call us on the Tipster hotline at 832-847-7837. And I would be very grateful if you haven't already, if you could take the time to rate, review, or follow the podcast on whatever streaming service that you use. I would be very grateful. I look so forward to talking with you again soon. And more cowbell.